This is the You, Me, and BTC podcast.
Cryptocurrency decrypted.
Welcome to episode 102. Today we have another special guest with us, Colin Cantrell, the creator of Nexus. His project encompasses all kinds of technology, but we're especially interested in the decentralized computing network and its corresponding cryptocurrency, the Niro. Mr. Cantrell will explain how Nexus got started, what problems it can solve, how it's different from Bitcoin, and much more. Stay tuned for a great show. Your hosts today are Tim Baker and myself, Daniel Brown. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 102 of the You, Me, and BTC podcast. I have to stop myself from saying 102 because apparently we decided that we didn't want to do that a few episodes ago. So it's 102.
I have no recollection of this.
Welcome to the show. I am Daniel Brown, and I'm here with
Timothy Baker.
Colin Cantrell.
That's right. We have another special guest today. We had an interview last week, and we're doing one now. I'm really glad we're kind of getting back into the interviews. It can be tough to schedule them sometimes, but we're making a couple work, so this should be fun. Yeah, Colin Cantrell is the kind of creator, founder of I'm going to call it a system because I think there's a lot to it, or I guess it's also called a pure SHA-3 peer-to-peer decentralized and distributed computing network. And I will let him get into that in a moment. Tell us what it is. It's called Nexus. I don't think I said that yet. It's called Nexus. Colin Cantrell, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So, yeah, I will let you just start there by expanding upon that brief description of Nexus. What is it?
Well, I guess I can start, in the simplest way, and we'll start expanding the details out.
Perfect.
From the highest level, the reason it's called Nexus is the definition of it, as far as the English dictionary, is a connection between two or more things. So, Nexus isn't just a peer-to-peer decentralized distributed computing network, otherwise known as the blockchain, or different other associated technologies. Torrents use similar principles. It's a connection between two or more things, and there can be many things that it's connected to. It could connect economies. It can connect people. It can connect, money essentially with, the computers. So it's really, the project is called Nexus, and the name was chosen specifically because it can describe the entire scope of it. But just focusing on the blockchain currency aspect, yes, that's essentially a pure SHA-3, peer-to-peer decentralized distributing network. And I think right now it stands at 15 different, features to advance the protocol in, connection with Bitcoin, mainly to help the Bitcoin community by providing new technology and proving them on a separate blockchain to have some more track record of, hey, this has been working and has been secure for X period of time. You might be interested in utilizing some of this technology. And also it's to provide us, I guess you could say the overall goal is independence, a peaceful way to change things instead of having to fight the system and fight the laws in order to change things. We can simply boycott it. But the problem is we cannot boycott a system if we have nowhere to go. So we're all kind of stuck doing what we do in the system as we know it without any other options. So that's one of the key components of Nexus, is to provide options for any people that may choose a different way.
Yeah, I like that. It's funny because just before we started recording, we were kind of asking or talking about where we wanted to take this. And I didn't even mention to you that another one of our pretty strong emphases is on liberty. We call ourselves the Bitcoin and Liberty podcast. And it seems like that fits pretty well. You're hoping to give people ways to be free, to do what they need to do and to have those options. And accomplish things in a pretty successful way. So can you tell us about the genesis, I guess, of Nexus? Like, what made you think about it? What made you create it? What inspired you to get started on all these 15 or so aspects?
Concerning just the blockchain itself, as far as that technology of Nexus, that subset?
I guess I would say whatever the first thing you did with Nexus, whatever the first thing you created or worked on, what made you want to do that?
Well, I figured out I could put a couple steel plates together, modulate the gap, or, set a gap, and create orthohydrogen, which I found as a fuel enhancement to normal automobiles. That's really how Nexus started.
That's interesting.
And the rest just became, just developing, then I got into electrical engineering and started developing frequency generator circuits and resonance circuits and figuring out how to resonate this water molecule and tap into energy that we may not be aware of just yet. Like where a few hundred years ago, they weren't aware that you could do internal combustion. They weren't aware of the chemical energy that could be released from molecules, just like with the nuclear energy that you can release by actually destroying matter. So that's where it really started. Like, to be completely honest, the blockchain kind of came years later, through my work, in software engineering and architecture. And then I got, into cryptocurrencies in 2013. And I just was like, oh, this is the new way. I just felt it, and we all have felt that. This is the new way to do it. We can actually do this. And so that kind of brought a whole other dimension to it to kind of tie all of this together, because essentially we need a stable currency. We need a stable container for wealth. Otherwise, all the wealth that we have earned can just be dried up in the bank runs. With the way that the banking system is designed now, it's just not sustainable for the future. So why go through all these efforts to build all these things and monetize them when all of that money could dry up because we don't have any say or transparency in the world's currencies? We don't know how much is being printed per day. We don't know how much is coming out into circulation. We don't know even how much the wealth is distributed.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have those ideas. We can't see that as people. And so we really have very, very little say in the monetary system, when the monetary system is really what governs all of our lives. It's like a pivotal piece of everybody's life. Today, I got to wake up. I got to go to a job I hate. I got to work to feed my children, to live paycheck to paycheck. Why? I don't know. I just have these pieces of paper that say this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. But I don't know what that means. So I'm just going to ignore it. And I'm going to keep doing what everybody else is doing, saving up for retirement, paying my taxes. And people can lose their whole lives just in that simple pursuit of survival, when honestly, the way I see it, the earth provides what we need for life. We can plant a seed and grow food. We can sustain ourselves. The water naturally filters through aquifers underground to give us underwater rivers that we can tap into and get our own water supply. And we're just forced into these sectations, and this has kind of created, in my opinion, an indentured slavery for people. People are stuck trying to constantly pay off this debt. And that all really roots down to the monetary system. So, one can advance all this technology, but if we can't take this technology and put it in the people's hands, there's no point in even doing it. Like what Tesla was trying to do, he made amazing advances in technology, but we use very, very few of his innovations. And some of his innovations would have freed people from some of these things, not just the monetary system, but from the need of constant power bills, for the need, of communication channels and radio frequencies that are, our tissue absorbs, unfortunately. This radiation, so it's a combination of implementation and stability to ensure that all of this work can go to the people that need it, to kind of rebalance things as far as I see it. And one of the core things is a new currency, which, like I said, to get back to my initial point with, getting into cryptocurrencies, I just started building mining pools and protocols, and I got really, really into it. And then I started building Nexus. It actually started as what was termed CoinShield, which we were trying to stop all the scams in the industry, because I watched it when there was just Namecoin, Litecoin, Feathercoin, a few others. And then it goes to like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 coin launches a day. And I'm just sitting there like, why are all these people getting screwed over? You know, we got to do something about this. And so that really started with the building of Nexus. And it wasn't even all called Nexus until more recently, until that kind of became the wrapper, that name of this whole set of projects, which are going to pretty much take me my entire life. You know, I mean, I have a 50-year plan, not a 5-year plan. So the Nexus, just like I said, one thing led to another, which led to another. And then CoinShield outgrew its name, and I started thinking about building economy, you know, and import, export through the crypto, and then even advancing it to the point of like working on decentralized internet with a trust system. But there's like infrastructure, like blockchain it's a really great advancement in consensus algorithms for a distributed computing network, which that's a big thing. But there's so many short sightings, and I feel like right now we're trying to put band-aids on it instead of actually building the proper structures that are going to allow it to be used on a global scale. You know, I mean, it was started as a simple experiment, and now, in my opinion, you know, it's kind of lacking some of that, how do I say it, fresh creativity that really Satoshi put into it. And it's also lacking the vision. I mean, it's kind of like, well, Satoshi thought this, Satoshi thought that. You know, there's no real definitive source of that creativity in it anymore. It's just everybody saying Bitcoin's this or Bitcoin's that or Satoshi wanted, and then people could argue. And then they make all these bips and they make all these soft forks of we're going to increase the block size, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this crazy transaction laddering. And I'm like, dude, put them on different protocols. You can transmit blocks with just the hash, because all you need to do is verify your Merkle root. You verify your signatures when you accept your transactions into the memory pool. You don't need to relay transactions in the blocks. You need to relay the proof of that transaction, which is the transaction hash. So that's all you really need to include. And even at a 1 megabyte block size, they could be getting, I think I calculated close to like 50,000 transactions per second, something like that, with just the current block structure by reducing the size. And some people are starting to get into it with the Scaling Bitcoin conference. They're talking about, hey, we don't need to verify signatures twice. We verify them on accepting in a memory pool, or we verify them when we accept a block. And we're doubling up the network overhead because we have to relay transactions, and then we have to include transactions in a block, and that's just overbloating these blocks. So yeah, we're going to increase the maximum block size. And it's like, yeah, but that's a Band-Aid. You know, that'll work for now. But what happens when the protocol can't handle that many people? Like what happened in 2013 when Cyprus drove the price up to $260. It crashed because Mt. Gox crashed, because they overloaded their whole exchange engine, and everybody said, oh my gosh, we're going to lose our money. And then they liquidated. And so like, if the infrastructure is not ready for mainstream adoption, why are we trying to make that? You know, why don't we put more effort into actually thinking like Satoshi, learning to think like Satoshi, and building off of that rather than thinking that we know, or thinking, you know, because Satoshi like had a unique way of thinking, and that's really what spawns the beauty of the blockchain. The whole functionality and the technology in itself, it's just all about thinking differently, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's all some pretty fascinating stuff. Backing up a little bit, I'll just say that it's really interesting that you're pulling all this just kind of from a general scientific maybe background, because that's all Bitcoin is it's a technology that people are learning about, experimenting with, testing out, and trying to improve, just like any other technology, like you mentioned, radios and engines and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really cool. But then, yeah, I do want to, you already mentioned a lot of it, but I do want to talk about the actual crypto coin part of it and the blockchain and everything. I know there are a lot of people out there who kind of dislike altcoins. And even you said, you know, there's like 50 launches a day, and it's a lot of them are kind of a joke. And some people just, you know, they'll replace alt with scam and call them scam coins just kind of by default. Mm-hmm. So, and we've talked about altcoins quite a bit on the show, and we know, I mean, we're definitely open to the idea. Of course, we should be trying different things and seeing what works and giving people options, like you said. But because so many of them are scams, you have to know what's different about them and what might make one better than another and what might make one useful and one not so useful. And so can you just tell us about that? What about Nexus makes it useful or better than a scam coin?
All right. Well, I've written thousands of new lines of code, fixed many bugs. I guess I can start with just some of the base. So Bitcoin's using secure hashing algorithm version 2. We all know is SHA-2, correct? And it's 256 bits. So I guess we'll start with the Nexus miners. It has 2 mining channels in which you can mine, and they're actually regulated by a precise reserve system. So that means, you know how the Bitcoin block time changes here and there? Sometimes it's 9.5 minutes, sometimes it's 10.5 minutes.
Right.
Well, there is no code regulating that. Like, it's really, the supply is based completely on the difficulty. So, if the chain slows down, then it's going to deflate a little bit. If the chain slows up or speeds up, it's going to inflate a little bit. So, it kind of works. But one thing I thought is transparency. So the reserve system allows you to monitor in real time how much is being produced every time interval, and it cannot sway from that number. It is mathematically locked. I use radioactive decay equation instead of block reward halving, which really stresses the market and the miners and everything. Being a miner, the block reward halves, there goes half your profits. It's like, so I made it a slow decaying curve, basically. That's how it's minted or created. Now, the miners are either a GPU miner or a CPU miner. The CPU miners are searching for dense prime clusters off of 1024-bit hashes. So to put that into perspective, that's a number that's 300 digits long. And we have very little knowledge of prime number structures in these large numbers. So the CPU miners are essentially searching for these prime clusters and mapping out the prime density in really high numbers. And the reason I went to 1024-bit hashing for the block hash, and it's a full length output too. Block hashes are 1024. They're 4 times the security of Bitcoin because quantum computers are coming out. And they're already working on encryption cracking quantum computers. So Bitcoin was developed before they really thought of it getting big. But quantum computers, they cracked SHA-2. The whole industry is based around that. And that's really all eggs in one basket. Yeah, we're banking the whole value of this economy on the security of this one hashing algorithm. So I use SHA-3 functions, Skyne and Kekik, and I created what's called the SK. So that way we have a balance. Hey, if there's a collision found in Skyne, Kekik will cover it. Skyne's kind of a weaving hashing function, and Kekik's a sponge function. So they complement each other very well. It's a very efficient algorithm. So basically, I took all the SHA-2 out. I made the block hashes 1024-bit. I made the transaction hashes 512-bit. I made the addresses 256-bit because it was using an outdated insecure hashing algorithm, I think RIPE MD 160 for Bitcoin address generation, which, it works, but I'm kind of a stickler for security, and I think very long term.
Are you tired of Bitcoin Dice and ready for something different? Try LuckyBit, the original falling coin game, at luckybee.it. It's the most exciting Bitcoin game on the web. You can bet on 5 different payout lines and win up to 999 times your bet. You can even use their faucet to get some free Bitcoin. Dice is boring. Play different at LuckyBit. Check it out at luckybee.it.
Our basic private keys go from Bitcoins are 256 bits based off of a Colbit's curve, which is a little faster in signature verification, but there have been some signature leakages in that specific curve. So I use an R curve, which is a random curve, 571 bit. So that gives the highest quantum security to date as far as your private keys and the hashing and the whole security model. And so those are the 2 mining channels. They get 50% of the reserves, which are regulated precisely by the decay equations. And then I don't know if you guys are familiar with Peercoin and the proof of stake model. That was something Sonny King created.
Just a little bit. I've heard about it,
Yeah,
but
kind of a passing.
yeah, but definitely explain more.
It brings your ability to process transactions, secure the network by not allowing a 51% attacker to just have mining power. That's also what these two mining channels do. Like, in order to take over Nexus just with the mining channels, you'd have to have 51% of the CPU channel and 51% of the GPU channel, which is going to put a lot higher cost in your hardware. It's not just one channel. So, I mean, let's say there's a CPU pool that has 50% of the mining power. They won't be able to attack the network because the GPU channel will balance that. And then the third balance is the proof of stake channel, which Sonny King's code was terrible. I got to say that from going into it, it just was a mess. So I rebuilt the whole staking system, but the biggest value to create from staking is actually interest. You know, you can hold coins and it gives people incentive. You can get a slight inflation, slight interest for just holding your coins. And that also allows blocks to be processed. So it speeds up the transaction processing time and the ability for the network to process them faster instead of relying on just one mining channel, which can be 51% attacked, anything like that. And then that spawned actually what I call trust keys. So when you start staking, I guess you could say, is what it's kind of termed as, you have to get what's called a Genesis transaction, which is your very first transaction, your very first stake block on the network. And that establishes your trust. Now, the longer you continually contribute to producing blocks for the network and processing transactions, your trust goes up, which means that you can have a higher likelihood of getting a trust block, and your interest rate slowly increases on an LN curve. It's a logarithmic mathematical curve. I chose that to kind of give a higher increase at first, and it kind of tapers off towards the end. So the trust network creates a backbone, which Bitcoin's kind of working on the relay network and things. This allows us to have a decentralized trust system. But the cost of trust is not in how much money you have or anything. It's in time. Because some of the most trusted people may not have money, but everybody has time. And the more money you have, the more your time is worth. So it basically reduces an attacker's desire to attack the trust network, which each trust node then can start voting on different parts of the chain and start voting in consensus algorithms. And the whole thing grows from that to where lighter clients like cell phone clients should never have to synchronize with the blockchain. So they can contact trust nodes and verify that all the trust nodes agree on certain transactions that they may have or participated in or certain blocks. So the trust network can form the core of the network with dedicated servers running these dedicated nodes, building their trust up, which basically awards people for being dedicated to the network instead of, you know, just hopping on and off. Now, the list can keep going. I'll try to be a little less verbose because there's a lot of technology that's been put into it. One thing, Bitcoin checkpoints are hard-coded in the source, which means I have to keep adding a new checkpoint every update. Nexus, they're all decentralized, which means nodes vote on the next checkpoint, and it's actually based on a time span. So basically, it can be given across the network without really much need to communicate with each other so that the chain can be secured. So there can't be 51% attacks past certain checkpoints, which are agreed upon every hour. So the chain every hour is secured more and more and more. Now, the difficulty retargeting algorithm goes usually every time there's a new block. It uses some complex mathematics, but creates a very stable difficulty algorithm that allows the network difficulty to rise and fall with the changes in hashing power. The protocol, I actually developed what's called the lower level protocol, which in a nutshell is a template protocol. So it allows anybody to code any protocol without having to rebuild a server. So it's basically a template server that you can put your own messaging system into it. And it handles 10,000 connections, no problem. I've seen it go up to 50,000 requests per second. It's stable code. And so that's what I'm building in to the core of it with the messaging system. And this advancement in the protocol will allow a lot more functionality to happen because Bitcoin's protocol is single-threaded messaging, which means once a block comes in, it has to process the whole block, check all the signatures, everything like that, which can take quite a bit of time, and then it'll relay it. And it has to do that in a queue, one after one after one after one, which gets really slow, which is why the Bitcoin block propagation is so slow, which causes miners to release empty blocks with no transactions, which causes the network to slow down, which, there's so many different problems with Bitcoin because the protocol itself on the network level has not been rebuilt since Satoshi. I mean, I'm pretty adept at network programming, and his network code is not the greatest. It works. But everybody's just kind of taking it as like, this is it. It's perfect. And they're overthinking it. But it's like, no, Satoshi never finished Bitcoin. Bitcoin is kind of left undone. And some of the really core issues in Bitcoin haven't been resolved, like the time. Clocks can be 2 hours from each other on the network, which opens a lot of exploitable holes, especially when they start making time-based securities, like their new BIP, I think BIP 65 or 66, with a time lock verified transaction where they can't be spent till this time lock. Well, if you got a 2-hour clock trip, that's not going to be too accurate. The network's not going to have a consensus across the world because computer clocks don't even see a second the same. So I built what I call the core LLP, which is, lower level protocol. There's the mining LLP right now and the core LLP, and I'm working on the messaging LLP. Then I'm going to break that into the voting LLP, the transaction LLP, the block LLP, and put everything on multi-threaded data connections, and then have them pushed to one central place so that, hey, you can verify blocks on multiple threads so you can relay and move everything a lot faster, which will be very necessary once more people start flooding into the network instead of just having services like Coinbase do all the transactions,
So what you're doing is you're trying to break things up to make them more specified. Is that what you're saying right now? So that they work more efficiently? Is that what you're meaning by breaking them all down into the different
LLPs?
Yeah, LLP just allows me to make any protocol with just a little bit new code. I can just create, I'll spare you all the details, but basically I can create any type of messaging protocol now. And it's always going to be high efficiency. It's all going to be multi-threaded. So instead of, think about it on Bitcoin, let's say one node is relaying. They get blocks, they get transactions, right? Well, every time they get a transaction, it's going to be in line with every other message that's been received. And it processes those messages one at a time, at a time, at a time. So you get these dust spam transactions. It loads up its ability to process a block that may have come in 5 seconds ago, but it doesn't get processed till later, which that adds up node to node to node to node till it takes 10, 15, 20 seconds for a block to propagate, which as the network has grown, like Bitcoin has, it creates a really, huge profit loss for people if their block gets orphaned. So they're going to be less incentivized to process transactions. And that's what I was getting at is a lot of miners actually don't even include any transactions in their block because they just want to get the Coinbase payout. And there's really no reason for them. And yet they're talking about scaling up the Bitcoin blockchain with all these elaborate, overcomplicated ideas. But the core of it all really needs to be reworked because, asynchronous is what it's called, a procedural synchronous messaging system like right now, in a queue. It works at small scales, but really the power comes from being able to do simultaneous processing. So I'm breaking the core level protocol into specialized protocols that all communicate with each other on different layers instead of it all being one spot, one message after the next message after the next message. It's tens of thousands of messages could be being processed per second. So that basically speeds up the ability for blocks to propagate through the network. That'll give more incentive for miners to include transactions, which trust transactions in the mining network will actually promote honest miners, and it'll penalize them for giving empty blocks. It'll penalize their trust, which will give them less of the perks of having trust in the network. The trust, I see it as kind of like a decentralized consensus voting, because Satoshi's initial concept of the block was every block is a vote, which was cool. Back in the CPU days, every block could be a vote, but now not everybody can get access to those votes because they don't have the hardware. They got to buy these ASIC rigs. They got to have all these different things, let alone there's so many nodes that don't even create blocks. They just process transactions. So, there's a lot of limitations that have been brought out from Bitcoin just from me simply observing it over the years.
Yeah. Tell me what you think about that, because I think I would definitely agree that there's limitations on Bitcoin. So what do you think going forward? Do you see Bitcoin working side by side with a ton of cryptocurrencies? Do you see that one of them might dominate and it might be Bitcoin or it might be something better? Or, well, yeah, and then if so, I mean, Bitcoin is pretty heavily, I mean, it's not mainstream yet, but it is, compared to any other cryptocurrency, it is way more established. So can you tell us about, the process going forward? What, would it be side by side, or how would something else like Nexus overcome it? Anything like that?
Well, what I'd hope, is that Bitcoin can adapt with the circumstances and the change. You can adapt quickly, because that's really going to be the determinant if something else, takes the center stage or not. I always use the analogy with Bitcoin is, are you familiar with vacuum tubes and transistors? I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I know what they are. I'm not sure I could tell you how they work. I know,
well, it's a switch. All it is a switch. Now, tubes are vintage now. Like, tubes actually sound much better, on tube amplifiers. People prefer them than to solid state amplifiers. But tubes are just too big to be able to create a computer out of them. That's why computers used to take up whole rooms. So I see Bitcoin as kind of like a tube. It's the transistor that's really going to make it mainstream, because it's going to make the cost low enough to put it in everybody's hands. But right now, there's too much cost in Bitcoin for it to really go mainstream, because you got the cost of learning, you got the cost of the coins, you got the cost of the hardware, you got to maintain the wallet, you got to deal with the Bitcoin developers, all these different costs, that, just kind of where computers were too big for anybody to have. But then somebody, named Steve Jobs figured out, I can make a computer and put it in everybody's hands. And that can free them. And that's kind of similar to how I'm thinking with Nexus. Now, of course, I want Bitcoin to succeed. And that's kind of part of the approach as well, is in hopes that as we progress our technology further, Bitcoin can find value in it and be able to utilize it so that they can advance themselves, and they don't need to worry about, hey, we're doing an experiment on Bitcoin. No, I mean, here's the proven experiment, and here's the track record, and here's how long it's worked and how long it's been secure. You might want to consider it. Here, the work's already done for you. Here you go. Have it. It's open source. It's free.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you kind of see like Nexus as a proof of concept, and if it works, you hope that Bitcoin could adopt some of these features. And if Bitcoin doesn't, then I guess the next best option is, all right, fine. I guess we won't use Bitcoin, and we'll find something completely new and better. Is that about right? Yeah,
it's somewhat of the two. It's developing a new technology and enhancing Bitcoin at the same time, not to compete with Bitcoin and say we're going to be bigger than Bitcoin, but to provide mutual value in the industry and fill spaces that maybe Bitcoin isn't. Because, there's still a market for tube amplifiers. I mean, people love them. They're great. So I think Bitcoin and all these other currencies are going to find their appropriate uses in the world at large. So Nexus is just filling one of those spaces and providing what it has to the rest of the community to better the whole industry, not just one part of it. You know what I mean? Anybody can be able to use it, and it could seriously improve Bitcoin.
Join the club, join the club, join the Bitcoin Talk Club.
Interested in Bitcoins or altcoins? Love chatting? We are the place for you. Bitcoin Talk Club is a new forum sensation coming to a computer near you. Whether you're a professional coin developer or someone that wants to know more, our doors are open for you. We are looking for people to join and help build this forum into a one-stop knowledge base for everyone's needs. We're looking for you at BitcoinTalk.club.
Join the club, join the club, join the Bitcoin Talk Club.
What kind of community and infrastructure is there to Nexus or the possibility for one? How?
Well, yeah, and what's your current status? Like, where's the community now? Do you have a lot of users, and are there exchanges and everything?
Yeah, we're on exchanges. We have users. I mean, it's really a community-built coin. I'm just a guy typing the code. I mean, a lot of these innovations came from me, but other ones came from other people suggesting things. Like, that's something I firmly believe in, is by the people, for the people. It's, what do you guys want in it? Now, sometimes I have to make some decisions for that, but really, the development started publicly, actually, about 1 month after I started working on the core, and pitched the idea to everybody, and that's when the community started forming. We have a lot of people that actually are involved constantly in giving suggestions. They'll say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Do you want this feature? Do you want that? Blah, 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 all the different things. So, I mean, I guess you could say the community is the core. Like, you know, how I started off, Nexus is a connection between two or more things. So it's a connection between people. It's a connection between computers. It's a connection between economies. It's a connection between technologies. It's a connection between industries, you know, and that's kind of how I see it.
So I got to say, this is all fascinating stuff. There's so much here, and I wish we could get into more detail about every one. And maybe we should. Maybe we'll have you back sometime to focus on, I don't know, I don't even know, just one of these things, on the mining, on the algorithms. There's so many things here we could talk about. But that was definitely...
Oh, it's a lot of information, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got to say, thanks for the overview and everything. And we'll give anyone listening, we'll get you the information for where to learn more at the very end. But before we get to that, I want to know, Colin, we do this with all of our guests. We ask for a personal story in the Bitcoin space. Anything at all that's worth telling, anything hilarious, anything terrible, anything world-changing that you could witness firsthand. So do you have anything interesting like that you could share with us, just some kind of personal story in the Bitcoin space or crypto space or anything?
Honestly, I spend most of my time in the code. I mean, stories I could tell you, personal experiences I had with the visions of it all, you know, like the story I gave you, how I got into it and realized, you know, I mean, or the story about how I pretty much locked myself in a room for about a year to build it, or to at least build it ready for launch, you know. And like going outside was like an event for me. I was like, wow, look at this world out here, you know, and like I spent so much time in that code that it's like the back of my hand. It's like I know where everything is. It's a part of me. I guess this isn't quite a story, but it's maybe something I can share that I learned from spending so much time in it. It's not about your ability to program. It's not about any of that. Anybody can learn to program. But the biggest challenge I faced in building Nexus was actually learning to think like Satoshi, learning to think and tune into his mind, because I could see how he thought, how he coded. You know, that's the biggest thing I can say, and that's what enables us to create this new technology that can liberate us people, is we have to think a certain way. We have to think with certain intentions. And the only way I got through it all, building it, was to know why I was doing it, because I wasn't making anything from it. I wasn't getting any socializing. I was literally in front of a computer 12 to 14 hours a day. And then all night, I'm sleeping and I'm dreaming of the code and solving problems while I'm dreaming. And I'm just like, man. You know?
I would say I'm a computer scientist myself, and I think I would completely agree with that anybody can code, which is definitely a good thing in a lot of ways. It's encouraging for people to hear, hey, anybody can do this. I'm going to figure out how to code. It's really not that hard. But I would completely agree that there's a lot more to it, kind of a commitment and a dedication to solving problems, really. And it sounds like you're committed to that. And so I hope it goes well.
Yep. The only way I could do it was to know I was doing it for the betterment of mankind. You know, rise up above yourself and do something to better the world around you, and hope that other people will kind of follow suit and start doing the same thing. And that's when the world really starts changing.
Yeah, definitely. So, hey, Colin, where can people find out more about you and about Nexus? Are there Twitter handles you want to share, or websites or email addresses? What should people be doing right now when they hit the stop button on the show?
Well, if you're interested in getting involved as far as helping with the community, just drop me an email. It's colin@nexusoft.io, which is COLIN at NEXUSOFT.io. You can check out some of the network statistics, some basic brief overviews of the features on the platform, which is nexusoft.io/platform. That shows you the economy's condition, the current trades, the mining reserves, all the different features coming to life. It's got a block explorer. We have IRC on there. You can also request an invite to our public Slack, which is nexusoft.slack.com. You can go to Bitcoin Talk and check out our thread where there's a community over there. Or you can simply just Google Nexus decentralized currency or Nexus Niro, whatever you choose, and you'll come up with a bunch of different statistics on where it's at and the levels of development. I usually keep developmental updates on Bitcoin Talk. I also post them on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Nexus Niro. And you can contact any members of the team, which, contacting me, you can get in touch with all of them and see how you'd like to get involved. But the number one thing that's driving this community is helping people and bettering the world and, making the world something that we can all appreciate living in. And it's us that does it. And that's what we've learned with Bitcoin. We can create our own money. We can create our own system. And we can base it on principles that we all know is our true nature, not the greed and the lust and the fighting and the anger and the wars. No, our true nature is love and helping one another. And that's really the biggest vision of it all.
Hey, I think that's great. I think it's beautiful. And I hope that people will check it out and get involved if they like what they see and keep on developing and giving people more options, trying to improve technology. Look it up. This was Colin Cantrell. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Thanks for listening to episode 102. All of the music in today's show was from John Stewart. Remember to check out this week's show notes at umeandbtc.com and leave us a comment. We'll see you next Thursday.